a land of iron and myth. The year was 1015. Norway was still a land of turmoil, a shifting chessboard of ambitious chieftains, zealous Christian kings, and the lingering shadows of pagan gods. The old ways were dying, but not yet dead. Blood feuds and clan loyalties still determined fates more often than royal decrees. Amid this chaos, in the frost-bitten hills of Ringerike, a boy was born into nobility. His father, Sigurd Syr, was a respected local leader, a man of the plough more than the sword. His mother, Osta Gudbrandsdatter, had already borne another son who would change history, Olaf Haraldsson, the man who would become Saint Olaf, Norway's eternal Christian king. But Harald was no saint. Even as a child, he was described as fierce, headstrong, and cunning, eyes that watched too carefully, a smile that came too easily in moments of triumph. By the age of 15, Harald stood beside his half-brother Olaf as they marched to reclaim the throne of Norway. Marching into legend at the Battle of Stiklestad in 1030, a boy stepping into the blood-soaked theatre of Norse power. But history is cruel to those who seek glory too young. Olaf was slain, his body torn by Saxon spears, the army shattered like ice in spring thaw, and young Harald, wounded and hunted, was forced to flee his homeland, the taste of defeat bitter on his tongue. From prince to exile, from boy to fugitive. But this was no ordinary exile. It was the birth of something far greater, the forging of a legend that would echo through 1,000 winters. The Wandering Blade, a sword for hire in the east. Harald journeyed east, across dark forests where wolves still ruled, over frozen rivers that cracked beneath his feet, and through mountain passes where the old gods still whispered, to the lands of the Kievan Rus. There, in the timber-walled court of Yaroslav the Wise, the boy-turned-fugitive became a warrior, no longer the prince in his brother's shadow, but a man finding his own weight in steel and purpose. It was in Yaroslav's service that Harald earned his first scars, and his first gold. He fought against Polish raiders, Baltic tribes, and steppe nomads, each battle teaching him the art of war, each victory adding to his growing reputation. But for a man with Harald's ambition, the Rus was merely a stepping stone. He sought greater glory, and he found it in the gleaming empire of Byzantium, where wealth and power flowed like wine at a king's feast. In Constantinople, the queen of cities, the jewel of empires, Harald joined the Varangian Guard, those elite foreign warriors sworn to protect the Byzantine Emperor, Norse giants wielding battle axes in a land of silk and subtlety. There, he became Araltes to the Greeks, the Northmen too valuable to discard, too dangerous to fully trust. He fought in campaigns across the known world, a blood-red trail marking his ascent to legendary status. From the scorching deserts of North Africa, where the sun bleached bones white as ivory, to the pirate-infested waters of the Aegean, where salt spray mixed with blood on his blade, to the marble streets of Jerusalem, Harald bled, conquered and plundered. In Sicily, he stormed fortresses thought impregnable, scaling walls under storms of arrows. In the Holy Land, he protected Christian pilgrims, while quietly honoring the battle gods of his ancestors. In Asia Minor, he crushed revolts with such efficiency that mothers would whisper, "Araltes comes," to quiet unruly children. And all the while, he kept poetry. Verses about his sword, Legbiter, which he claimed never thirsted long for blood. About his lovers in palaces and tents alike. About enemies who fell beneath his axe. About the rage that drove him forward, ever forward. He was a soldier, a mercenary, a poet of the blade, a legend in the making. And with each battle, the boy who fled Norway faded further into memory, replaced by the man who would someday return to claim a throne. Golden chains, power, betrayal, and escape. But power, especially for a foreigner, comes with a steep price. At the Byzantine court, a nest of vipers draped in purple silk, Harald rose too fast, and made too many enemies with long memories and longer daggers. There are tales, murky and mysterious as the waters of the Bosporus, that he was imprisoned by the Empress Zoe herself, the aging beauty whose favor could raise a man to glory or condemn him to darkness, with equal caprice. Some say it was jealousy that turned her against him. Others claim politics and court intrigue. The truth, like much of Harald's life, remains shrouded in saga and song, but even iron chains couldn't hold him. Harald escaped. With cunning worthy of Loki himself, he broke free, and with him, he took his vast treasure hoard, accumulated through years of warfare and plunder. Some legends even say he blinded a prison guard with a hot poker and bribed his way aboard a ship under cover of night, the gold sewn into his clothing weighing him down as he swam to freedom. He left Constantinople as few men did, alive, wealthy, and with the dangerous knowledge of imperial secrets. He returned to Kievan Rus not as a refugee, but as a celebrated warrior. There, he married Elisiv, the daughter of Yaroslav the Wise, cementing his status as a man of consequence, no longer merely a sword for hire, and with gold that would ransom kingdoms, a noble wife with royal connections, and the scars of 100 battles mapping his rise to power. He set his gaze westward and sailed home to claim what he believed was rightfully his, the waiting throne of Norway. The Iron Crown, Norway under Harald's heel. In 1046, Harald returned to Norway, not as a prince in exile, but as a conqueror with the weight of Byzantine gold and Eastern glory behind him. The throne was held by his nephew, Magnus the Good, son of St. Olaf and legitimate heir, a young king beloved by many. Rather than plunge the land into civil war, Harald agreed to co-rule with Magnus, in name only. 2 kings, 1 throne, and tension sharp as winter ice. The 2 kings shared power uneasily, like wolves circling the same prey. Then, in 1047, Magnus died under sudden and mysterious circumstances. Some say illness took him, others suspect poison in his drinking horn. Either way, Harald was now sole king of Norway, and his rule was absolute, unforgiving as the North Sea in winter. He reorganized the army, turning farmers' sons into disciplined warriors, crushed regional lords who questioned his authority, sometimes burning their halls with families inside, rebuilt fleets that would carry Norwegian power across known waters, and sought to expand his power, even to Denmark, that fertile land to the south. For nearly 20 years, Harald fought to claim Denmark, battling Svein Estridsson, the Danish king, in a conflict that seemed without end. Though he never captured the Danish crown, he inflicted terrible damage, burning towns to ash, slaughtering armies without mercy, seizing hostages whom he treated with calculated cruelty. It was said that in battle, no man could match Harald's fury. Where he led, victory followed, though often at costs that made even hardened warriors blanch. The people called him Hardrada, hard ruler, a title earned through blood and fear rather than love. But behind the crown, behind the calculating eyes that had seen empires and deserts, there was always ambition, a hunger that Norway alone could not satisfy. The fateful claim, England beckons. In January 1066, destiny called across the North Sea. King Edward the Confessor of England died without an heir, leaving the wealthiest kingdom in northern Europe vulnerable to claim. 3 men stepped forward to grasp the English crown. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful noble in England, brother-in-law to the dead king. William of Normandy, the ambitious duke across the Channel, distant relative to Edward. And Harald Hardrada, the king of Norway, veteran of 3 continents of warfare. Why did Harald believe he had right to England? The answer lay in politics, nearly forgotten by all but him. Because of an old agreement, a deal between Magnus and Harthacnut, the former king of England and Denmark. If one died without heirs, the other would inherit both kingdoms. Magnus had claimed the English crown by right of that treaty, and Harald, as Magnus's heir and successor, believed it was now his by blood right and law. More than legal claim, it was a chance for Harald to win immortal glory, to build an empire spanning from Jerusalem to the edge of the known world, a North Sea empire that would eclipse even Canute's brief domain. He formed an alliance with Tostig Godwinson, the banished brother of Harald, a man consumed by bitterness and dreams of revenge. Together, they would bring fire and steel to England's shores. Together, they would reforge the map of the North. The invasion begins. Triumph at Fulford. In September of 1066, Harald Hardrada launched his invasion with cold calculation. He sailed with an armada of over 300 longships, their dragon prows cutting the grey waters, their sails like storm clouds on the horizon. A force of more than 10,000 warriors, hardened by decades of Norwegian winters and countless battles. On September 20th, he met the English Earls Edwin and Morcar at the Battle of Fulford. just outside York, young noblemen leading hastily assembled forces against the most feared warrior in Christendom. The fighting was brutal, a clash of shield walls and singing steel. The English formed a defensive line along a ditch, hoping to use the terrain against the invaders. But the Vikings, veterans of 100 wars from Sicily to Syria, were not so easily contained. Harold's tactics were swift and merciless. He feigned retreat, drawing out the inexperienced English troops. When their lines broke, he enveloped their flanks and crushed the Saxon army between hammer and anvil. The boggy ground ran red with English blood. Those who fled drowned in the nearby river, weighted down by mail and fear. The city of York surrendered, its citizens trembling before the giant Northman whose reputation had preceded him across the sea. The north of England lay open to his ambitions. Harold's claim seemed secure as he accepted hostages and promises of fealty. He waited at Stamford Bridge, 7 miles east of York, confident of success. There he prepared to receive more hostages and supplies, promised by the cowed population. But he didn't know that Harald Godwinson was coming with the fury of a people defending their homeland. He didn't know that his saga was approaching its final verse. The final battle, Stamford Bridge. Harald Godwinson, newly crowned King of England, made a bold gamble that would be sung of for centuries, marching his army north from London in just 4 days, covering nearly 200 miles over Roman roads long fallen into disrepair. On the morning of September 25th, he caught the Norwegians by surprise, his forces appearing like phantoms through the morning mist. The Vikings were resting, many unarmored, expecting hostages and tribute, not the full might of the English army descending upon them like Ragnarok. What followed was one of the most dramatic clashes in medieval history, the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Legend tells of a lone Viking berserker who held the narrow bridge alone against the English advance, his axe rising and falling like a butcher's cleaver, slaying English soldiers one by one. 40 men fell before him until someone crept beneath the wooden planks and thrust a spear up through the gaps, piercing him from below. With the bridge cleared, the full fury of the English assault crashed into the scrambling Norwegian lines. Harald Hardrada, now 61 but still towering above his men like a war god of old, rallied his forces. Clad in his distinctive blue tunic, he fought with the desperate fury of a man seeing his final dream slipping away. He led a charge, the famous berserk charge of the sagas, but was struck by an arrow in the throat, finding the one vulnerable spot in his armor. He died instantly, falling as he had lived, in violence and blood and iron. Tostig fell soon after, his dreams of revenge buried with him in English soil. The Viking army broke under the hammer of English vengeance, fleeing back toward their ships. Of the 300 ships that had sailed from Norway, only 24 returned, carrying broken men and the bitter taste of defeat. Twilight of Gods, the death of an era. Harald Hardrada's death marked more than the loss of a king. It marked the end of an age. The Viking Age, that long and violent era of seafaring raiders, settlers, and explorers that had shaped European history for nearly 3 centuries, was over. The old ways of longship and axe, of raid and plunder, of pagan fury and wandering warriors, belonged now to memory rather than the living world. Just weeks later, Harald Godwinson himself fell, defeated by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings, an arrow to the eye ending England's brief Saxon Renaissance. England changed forever, Europe changed forever, and the Old Norse world faded into history and saga, becoming the stuff of fireside tales rather than contemporary fear. Eternal Saga, the legacy of the last Viking. Harald Hardrada was more than a king. He was a warrior scholar who spoke 6 languages and composed verse even as he ordered men to their deaths, a pirate general who brought Byzantine tactics to northern warfare, a cunning diplomat who navigated the courts of 3 civilizations, a brutal conqueror who left widows weeping from the Russian steppes to Sicily's shores. He fought from the fjords of Scandinavia to the deserts of Africa. He wrote verses by torchlight and swung his axe in battle after battle. He loved women passionately and killed men dispassionately. In many ways, he embodied the spirit of the Viking in its fullest form. Fierce, fearless, far-reaching, answering to neither god nor king save himself. And in his death at Stamford Bridge, the Viking Age drew its last breath, passing into the mists of history. But his story did not end there. His descendants continued to rule in northern lands. His sagas were sung for centuries in mead halls and royal courts alike, and to this day, his name still echoes wherever tales of warrior kings are told. Harald Hardrada, the last Viking, the man who lived 3 lives in one. In Valhalla, they say, the bravest warriors feast forever in Odin's hall. If such a place exists beyond the veil of death and time, Harald Hardrada sits there still, a sword in one hand, a goblet in the other, watching, as the old gods smile upon the last and greatest of their mortal champions. For though kings and kingdoms fade, legends never die.